Um, well, I wanted to welcome everyone. Thanks again for joining us. Again, my name is Ashley Cook. I am from the University of Minnesota and also part of this UEvents committee. So thank you again for being here. And I'm very excited to let you know that we have two guest speakers today. So joining us today is Christy Altendorf and Nick Peter. Christy is the Director of Marketing and a Senior Event Planner for D'Amico. A board member of the Minnesota Meetings and Events Advisory Committee, and a co-founder of the Minnesota Events Coalition. Nick, who's joining her, is the Event and Facility Sales Manager for the Minnesota Orchestra, the immediate past president of ILEA Minneapolis St. Paul, and a steering committee member of the Minnesota Events Coalition. Together, they're going to talk about some of those fun and creative event and catering trends that we can think about for some of our upcoming events. So I'll give them the time. So let's welcome Nick and Christy. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. I feel a little embarrassed to admit that while the title of today is Coffee and Conversation, I'm not yet fully caffeinated today. So you have my apologies. Please excuse me. Also, hot tip, I know I'm late to the party, but if you have not tried the cold foam at Starbucks, highly recommend. Changed my life last week. So give it a shot. So today I'm here to talk to you guys a little bit about, first who I am, who D'Amico Catering is, and then just share a little bit of almost a case study of a recent really beautiful event that we did that speaks to hopefully the environments that you all work with, but also a lot of the food and beverage trends that were woven into it, as well as quite a bit of branding opportunity that was in there too. So first and foremost, Ashley, thank you for the introduction. My name is Christy Altendorf. I work for D'Amico Catering. D'Amico is the largest caterer here in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area and one of the largest caterers in the Midwest. I think the name D'Amico Catering is a little misleading. We're actually truly a hospitality company. So we have 10 exclusive venues in our portfolio. And we also do a lot of what we call off-premise catering, where essentially we bring our kitchen to you. And that may be in a venue that has an open catering list. It might be in your offices, it may be in your home, but truly we've catered in more places than I care to share in conditions that wouldn't be considered a kitchen necessarily. So truly the company, I think, can do it all. The company itself has a very large, well-rounded published menu. My specific role within the company tends to be with higher end clients that need higher touch points when it comes to creativity and formulating custom menus to help them tell the story of their event through food. So that's a little bit about who I work for and what I do within these walls that you're seeing here. The first thing that I want to touch on today as we dive into it and really talk about that case study is something that Ashley, I think, is pretty familiar with. What we'll look at today is a menu that I had put together with the help of our pastry chef and our executive chef to suggest to the University of Minnesota Foundation for the closing of their Driven campaign. And Ashley, again, I'm sure could speak to far more details than I can, but with that, we really wanted to make sure that the menu that we were creating for this wonderful celebration was telling the story of all of the accomplishments that the campaign itself had achieved through the different years of raising those funds. So if we can, and I'm not in control of the screen, I'm so sorry, my tech's a little wonky today. Thank you, move on to the next slide. This deck that you're seeing is what I had sent to the team at University of Minnesota Foundation to suggest to them not only the menu that we were proposing, but also trying to be really thoughtful and intentional in explaining why the menu items that we had created were great tie-ins to help with that closing celebration. Moving on to the next slide. Thank you. So first and foremost, as we welcomed guests into the venue, McNamara Alumni Center, which is set on the University of Minnesota campus here in Minneapolis, we really wanted to kick things off right away by hosting guests, by getting drink in hand immediately. And so with that, the thought here with this welcome experience was to have not only a beautiful glass of sparkling rosé, it was finally spring in Minnesota, and outside of wearing shorts when it's 60 degrees, and sitting on patios, no matter what the temperatures are, everybody's ready for a glass of rosé at that point. So starting off with a sparkling rosé and then elevating it a little bit where we're clipping a small bamboo cone filled with a popcorn made by a local popcorn shop that's just in the area of campus to do a really fun pairing. And so a natural pairing with sparkling wine in general, much less rosé, would be raspberries. And so the thought was that we would have a raspberry coated popcorn attached to this cute little glass. As we move on to thinking about the rest of what beverage service might look like, I think with big donor events like this, it's really important to have beautiful, thoughtful products. These are people who are well educated and they like to drink beautiful things at home and at events. So I think having lovely products is important, but also wanting to make sure that we're creating a fun experience for people that perhaps they hadn't seen before when it comes to that beverage realm. So one thought that we had was making sure that we're showing them something fresh and exciting, which was this hot off the press station. The concept behind this, you can see in the photo of French press, is to build a bottom layer with different herbs, botanicals, maybe floral elements that a created cocktail then goes over and then steeps to create a really just fun, interactive experience for guests. This isn't something that we wound up doing at the event, but I think is a great concept that I'm hopeful to use at future events in the next year or so. As you can see with this next slide, we had many different types of hors d'oeuvres that we would be passing for guests. And all of these were to be inspired by the commitment to DEI that the university has. And I'll let you read through these on your own. We won't go through them line by line, but all of these creating not only beautiful touch points and conversation pieces for folks, but also too, as a caterer, it's always my job and always at the top of my mind to make sure that we're being really respectful of how many different types of individuals like to eat. So as you can see here with the dietary indicators at the end of each one, we had a really good mix of things that were gluten-free, dairy-free, kosher style, no pork on the menu, lots of great different options and really something for everybody. All right, and as we move into the next slide, while the previous slide was past hors d'oeuvres, I'm a big fan of past things at events. It's lovely to bring things to people. And I think we've all been that person at an event where we feel stuck in conversation a little bit. And it's nice to be able to have the food come to us and to provide a talking piece for the group that we might be networking with. That to me is essential. I also like to really balance that out with a station. And so this hors d'oeuvre table, a harvest table, was to really help highlight all of the agricultural work that the U of M does and put together a beautiful display where if somebody's starving when they first show up to the event, that they can just pop over and make a plate off of this beautiful table. So something for everybody, something for those who are in conversation, something for anybody who might need a bite right away. And outside of that, one thing I really love about these grazing tables is, yes, it's food, but it's also almost decor for folks. So it really helps enhance, I think, just the overall experience by having this beautiful, lavish, lush display that's available for guests. Moving on, once cocktail hour was over with, we were going to invite folks to be seated. And this is really where the plated dinner service began to tell the story of the campaign. So as you can see, we first had an amuse-bouche. This is inspired by, again, that agricultural leadership that the University of Minnesota is known for. This was a sweet corn panna cotta with a puffed kernza and fresh herbs. And kernza is a type of grain that was actually developed at the University of Minnesota, and it's not widely available on the marketplace just yet, but it's getting there. And so to be able to get our hands on this truly local product and to incorporate it right away was pretty special. The next course is inspired by the health advances that the U of M really focuses on. And with this, we used a Honeycrisp apple and a Manchego cheese. Honeycrisp apples, again, were developed at the University of Minnesota, and then paired that with a chilled cucumber soup with dill, and then serving it in a test tube was really our way of giving that nod to those scientific advances. We did not wind up doing that, by the way. But again, really, as Chef and I were sitting down conceptualizing all of this, we're looking for different ways through both food and presentation that we could touch on all of these little micro stories within the closing of the campaign. Main course, commitment to sustainable food practices. So this was a duet plate. With a large group, duet plates are convenient, right? You've got 2 proteins on 1 plate and you don't have to think about who wants chicken and who wants beef. So it's a great option to give people a little taste of everything and also to minimize the work on UMF's end in terms of making sure everybody was happy with everything. And you can see the description there. We had a beef tenderloin and suggested a wild rice walleye cake at this point. Walleye is a fish native to Minnesota. It's the state fish and something that, you know, most true Minnesotans are really happy to see wind up on their plate. And then finally, just ending with some beautiful little miniature desserts. You know, during COVID, I think there was a tendency, rightfully so, to shy away from family style service. And as we've slowly, finally migrated past this, we're seeing some of that come back. So having a variety of just cute little shareable desserts that people can grab one off of a platter and enjoy, we really felt like that was a great way to finish up a beautiful meal experience at the table. Once the meal was over with, there was an amazing program that the foundation had put together. And while I have no claim to fame in any of that, it was really fun to be on site and to see how fantastic that was. But that's not where the event ended. So we knew after the program was going to finish up, there would be an after party for people to mix and mingle and connect and finally get to be together again. And this is where we wanted a further interactive dessert experience to come into play. So you'll see photos here in a minute of how this actually wound up, but to do dessert pairings that are paired with really thoughtful beverages was a fun way that we thought we could finish things up in a sweet way, but also maybe in a way that people either hadn't seen before or that maybe they hadn't even thought of doing on their own in their home. So lots of different options, but a bundt cake, chocolate is a great natural pairing with a ruby port. Bringing those U of M developed Honeycrisp apples in again into a little apple muffin with goat cheese icing. These sound weird, they're delicious. Pairing that with an old fashioned was great. We had a little like Snickers bar that our pastry chef had put together with a stout beer, and so on and so forth. You can see just lots of great pairings to help surprise and delight people for one final time as we were finishing up that culinary journey for them at the event. All right, and then finally, speaking of surprise and delight, I'm always a big fan of something for people as they're walking out the door. I want to put food in their hand immediately when they walk in, and I want to put something in their hand as they're leaving to help drive memories of the event and give them one final thing for them to say, wow. And so with this, we created a station that used beans from a pretty new and fresh Black-owned small business, the Get Down Coffee Co., and then did a custom shortbread cookie that was done in University of Minnesota colors, wrapped in a little cellophane bag. So this was a great way for people just to grab a little final sweet ending to go on their way out. And whether they were gonna enjoy that cookie that night or save it, hopefully even better for a snack the next day, we ensure that people are gonna keep thinking about us and keep remembering that event. And this next slide is super boring. It just has my contact info in case anyone's interested. And then we can flip through these last final 3. Again, everything that you just saw in this deck, these were all ideas. This was the first, all the bells and whistles that we had shared with the team. And so what we served at the event, there were things pulled out of every different slide that you saw today, but it certainly wasn't all of it. So first, if we can go back one, please. This is one of those branding opportunities I want to talk about. So these, as you can see, were the mini braised duck banh mi's. And I'm a really big fan of, if you can, having people be able to read what you're serving them. In a group setting, when we're mixing and mingling, it's really difficult for service staff to articulate what it is that people are eating. And it's not because they don't know what it is. Of course, they're educated and polished and professional. But the problem is they're interrupting conversation and it can be a little bit uncomfortable. So if we can create something where people can easily identify not only what it is that they're enjoying, but what those dietary indicators are that are associated with that product, I don't think there's anything better than that, quite frankly. So what I did is I worked with our graphic designer just to create these really simple, I guess, indicators, right? And from there, I sent it off to the print shop and had them printed on vinyl. Measurements, of course, of those cigarette trays were taken, but the vinyl came back from the printer and it truly just slicks right on the front of it. Pro tip, use a credit card to smooth it out and make sure you don't have any bubbles in there. And then people pass it. It's not only beautiful and identifies what things are, but it's also making sure that we don't have any allergy worries. And then underneath the little banh mis that you can see there too, we had done a tray liner that had our D'Amico Catering logo on there. I think that can easily be replaced with any logo that you guys might want. But to be able to see who's doing the catering or what event it is that's producing this, I think that's a great little branding opportunity that we don't see as many caterers taking advantage of as maybe what we could. All right, so the next slide, this is that apple, manchego, and chive salad. The edible floral petals were on there just to give it a little bit of freshness and brightness. And truly the ratio of this is half manchego cheese, half Honeycrisp apple with a little bit of chive worked in there. And it is a combination that I highly recommend. And then finally, we can see these dessert pairings. So we've got a cute little macaroon that we paired with a rose lemonade as a non-alcoholic option. And then those goat cheese icing apple muffins that I had referenced earlier that we paired with an old fashioned. So just a cute way to give people a little something for each hand and to pair with a beverage or dessert, depending on which way you look at it, that's going to complement each other in a way that your guests might not have expected. And I think that's the end of it here. Yeah, that was it. So that was just a little synopsis, a little understanding of how we got to this beautiful event with one of our favorite clients. Hopefully that was a little bit helpful. I think if you have catering professionals that you work with, they're happy to give you their own ideas. And for you, maybe even to share these with them. I know myself, I'm always happy to hear of new things. So that was what we had done. And we're looking forward to more beautiful events like this with the university moving forward.
Well, thank you, Christy. It's always hard to follow the food conversation. I do have to say that. So I just have one slide just to kind of show my my talking points here. Thanks again for having me join this group. I wanted to again give some background. I met Ashley and her colleagues when I worked at the University of Minnesota at the McNamara Alumni Center. So it's kind of nice to make that connection. The venue that Christy mentioned earlier, and it's nice to see a lot of Minnesota colleagues on this call. So a little bit about me, I work for the Minnesota Orchestra, and we operate our own venue in downtown Minneapolis called the Orchestra Hall, comprised of 25,000 square feet of event space. I serve on the event management team, and my primary role is to oversee the sale and operations for non-orchestra events. So when clients want to rent the venue and use it for their own events. So my talking points are both related to events at the Minnesota Orchestra, as well as some general comments about trends that I'm seeing kind of in the event and venue world. So the 4 points I'm going to cover are customer service and guest experience, safety and security, accessibility and inclusion, and digital experience. So first off with customer service is always on the mind of guests. What kind of experience do you have when you go to a restaurant, a hotel, a retail store, and guests translate this experience and expect similar things when they're attending an event. So here at the orchestra, we've put a lot of time and effort into our training of our staff and volunteers, especially because of the format and guidelines of events have been changing so much. And so we want to make sure that people are interacting, the people that are interacting with our guests have the same messaging and content that the planners and producers of the event have. So we have focused a lot on training our staff and volunteers, and we focus a lot on positive phrasing and conflict resolution and things that our staff need to deal with on site. The second point of safety and security, and this is probably the more gloomy part of my content, but everyone has this on their mind, from the health and wellness standpoint to the safety of their surroundings. People are hypersensitive about their surroundings and what's going on then. The orchestra, we actually have a all-day music event here coming up this Saturday. And with what we've seen in the news and the media, people have a perception of what it's like to be at a large gathering or even small gatherings. And so this is definitely at the forefront of our mind. So kind of turning that around and thinking about how do we turn that around and make it positive. I think a large factor of what you're doing to promote the event and market your event and what communication you're sending ahead of time is very important to let people know that you are attentive to this and that you're looking to create and produce a safe and healthy event. I think the major point and something that I feel like has increased over the pandemic is pre-event communication. This has become much more needed and expected from guests. What used to be a simple timeline or, go here and park here, people are definitely expecting more timely communication, more communication about the policies and guidelines of what your venue and event will have. I think this has also made us focus on how we communicate with people. Obviously, there's broadcast emails, but we've taken many different approaches to reach people through different mediums. So that's included text messages, it's robocalls, and it's all the communication from pre-event all the way to post-event. So that can include surveys, other methods. I know many events will use event apps. So for a conference or something like that, that allows you to send push notifications. People are expecting this communication, and it's not just through their normal paper channels. So again, how do you turn this around and make it positive? Again, by just simply stating that you're making an attentive approach to communicating and making a safe and healthy event, I think is important. And also just marketing your event with graphics and language that implies that health and safety are the top of mind. So something that we did is we created graphics and icons during the course of the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic. And I don't even know if we're really out of the pandemic, but what we're seeing now is people are wanting to kind of still see what our safety guidelines are and to give them the flexibility to attend or not attend. The next topic of accessibility and inclusion, emphasis has definitely put on event professionals to take our due diligence and make sure that we're making events accessible and inclusive. And I'm by no means an expert on this, and I know you had a previous session on DEI, and I took a look at some of those notes to make sure I wasn't overlapping too much, but I can talk a little about how these things are at the forefront of our guest experience. Again, it comes back to pre-event communication, giving people the ability for guests to get in touch with us about their needs and their requests ahead of time, and documenting that in a way that makes sense for your organization and your on-site staff. So to make sure that the first point of contact that someone reaches out and has a need or request, that gets passed on to the on-site staff, and that they have a good experience. Also thinking about what accommodations venues can make. Are there accessible drop-off points for cars? Are there nearby bus routes? Is there bike parking? Are there other services that the venue provides or a nearby place might provide that your guests might be interested to know about? And I think also we still have to think about a different level of accommodation that we still need for our virtual and hybrid events, seeing that both on the venue and planner side. So for sight impaired, is there audio description? For hearing impaired, is there closed captioning or live captioning? For venues, non-gendered restrooms, name tags, preferred pronouns, lactation rooms, ASL interpreters, translators, like it can go on in terms of the various things. And I think the most important part is to just explore these options with your venue or your producer to see what's possible and what services they may already have and what services you may want to implement. Another area of this that we're exploring, or not more exploring, but we've been doing quite a bit of, is sensory-friendly events. So a way that we're being inclusive and creating inclusive experiences of patrons for all ages and abilities, including those on the autism spectrum and those with sensory sensitivities. So we've actually been doing this with what we call sensory-friendly concerts, and we provide several of those throughout the year. We provide a relaxed environment where audience members can be who they are while they're enjoying the music and the event. And then we also provide quiet spaces, noise canceling headphones, fidgets, and other activities, and let people kind of enjoy the concert in their own environment. They can sit in a chair, they can be on the floor, wherever they feel comfortable. So I feel like that's an area that we've been expanding a lot in, and also is maybe an area that people don't expect, because people sometimes expect they go to a classical concert and they need to be quiet, and they can only give applause at certain areas, but we kind of turn these sensory friendly events into a different experience that is unique that way. My last point is about digital experience and ways you can interact with guests and patrons. And these examples definitely deal with my experience with patrons and concert goers. So when I was preparing these comments, I was thinking about how would this apply to the types of events, donor events and university events that you're doing. So maybe as you're thinking through the comments, I'd be curious to see if you have any ideas. But one point is obviously QR codes. They definitely have made a comeback. My marketing team laughed at me back in 2019 when I wanted to put a QR code on something. They're like, that's archaic. That's no longer something that we do. But those definitely have come back, and doesn't only provide a quick information to your audience, the person scanning the code, but it can also provide you good data and analytics about your users and guests. It can tell you what they clicked on next, and how they're interacting with the information that you're providing. At the orchestra, our preferred method is all digital and electronic. We used to be all paper, and prior to the pandemic, we're able to switch to electronic, meaning the patron can get their ticket via text, via email, they can put it on their Apple Wallet. And this kind of goes back to the point of customer experience and guest experiences, that by having electronic ticketing, this allows us to provide quicker and more efficient customer service. This allows us to make a seat change, send them a new ticket, all of that kind of stuff that updates real time. It doesn't have to deal with paper tickets. We still use printed tickets. That's definitely something that is people still bring in and will print at home even, but we still have an electronic system where everything is scanned. So we know in real time how many people are in the building, where they're possibly seated, their name, their contact information, et cetera, unless of course someone decided to pass their ticket on to someone else. And then along with this, we're starting to explore like mass communication systems that would allow us to contact the people actually in the building. So again, if there was an emergency or an evacuation of some kind, we would be able to contact everyone that's tickets was scanned based on like the email address or the cell phone number that we have for them. Another area that we've been implementing over the past year is mobile ordering and using an app. So this is kind of one of the comments I was thinking, was like, how would you apply this to maybe a donor or university event? So one thing that we're doing obviously is people can order their intermission beverage or something from their seat. So they can order it from their seat and then go pick it up at a central location. And we're also doing that with our merchandise. So someone can order a t-shirt, a CD, a coffee mug, something from the comfort of their own seat, and then pick it up before they leave for the evening and off to the car and they go. So one idea I had about this is if it would apply to a university event, if you had like college merchandise or something that you wanted to have, or a alumni shop or a market of something where people could interact digitally with the market and then pick up those items at the end of the evening or at the end of the event. And this is very similar to what we've been doing many years with mobile bidding at silent auction. So it's a kind of a concept, but allows the guests to actually like pick their items and see it ahead of time before placing the order. And then obviously event apps is something that we're seeing a lot more of too. It becomes its own guest experience. People download it prior to the start of the event. So they're interacting with you, before they step foot in the venue or the virtual or hybrid event or whatever kind of event you're producing. And it starts to set the tone for branding. So you can kind of give people the feel and the thoughts and the theme and tease the event through the event app before people even step foot in the venue. I would say one thing about the event app is if you don't put 100% into it, it could flop and not be as effective. And I know that event apps are, there's all types out there and there's all types of design levels and functionality levels. But I do think that that is something that is becoming more popular, especially because people are interacting all through their phone and not necessarily looking at signage, and also kind of a more cost-efficient way to, create a program agenda, share pictures and things like that after the event. So those are my comments about some of the event and venue trends. I guess I'll hand it back to Ashley and we have time for questions and answers.
Yeah, thank you. You guys, that was very informative even for me, and I work with you guys often, so thank you for that. So let me, there was some questions that came through earlier, but let me start with, From your perspective, and in your current role, so this is for both of you guys, what positive changes, if any, have you seen implemented after in-person events have started back up again?
I'll start off with a really, I guess, just general observation, but it's been really impactful to see how much people just love being in a room together again. That's something that I don't think we knew how much it meant until we didn't have it anymore. And to be able to see our wedding clients or our corporate clients or social, any group that it may be for any reason, they're ready to celebrate. And trust me, I cannot even tell you what our business volumes look like this year. So if that's any indication, like people are chomping at the bit, and it's nice to know that they finally see how much this means. I think sometimes our industry as event professionals is not given the credibility always that it has so sorely deserved for so long. And I think because people had to go without for 2 years, they finally understand the importance of that connectivity and also how important it is to have people who have the skills to bring them together in meaningful ways.
Awesome. Nick, anything to add? Or
I don't have anything to add, Christy. I think you did a good job of giving a good summary of that. I agree with that.
And then Trevor, I saw you raise your hand. So do you want to ask your question?
No, actually, I just wanted to add on to something Nick said too, that we're working on in terms of communicating, I think around events. We had a big annual event that we do every year. It's on the eve of commencement. We hear from our honorary degree recipients. And this happens, so it happened in mid-May, and this happened to be a time when cases were on the uptick here in New York. Hi, I'm Trevor Ken. I'm the Director of Special Events at New York University. So one thing that we were doing, which I thought was something that we are likely to carry through into the fall, as you know, there's a new variant again, because there's always going to be a new variant coming through, to kind of see how cases are happening locally. So not only did we send out like an attendance confirmation email 2 days before the event, which is typical, right, to see if anyone would cancel, but actually the morning of the event, and this came up because we had some sort of senior leaders who had concerns and were worried that people would just not show up and, oh my God, we're gonna have an empty room, was just to send an actual, it's a via Gmail merge, so we know people received it, right? It wasn't like a email marketing, which you never know if it's gonna make it into someone's spam. But essentially, it was just a really friendly reminder for people to say, hey, if you're not feeling well today, we ask that you please stay home. We actually encouraged people to take a rapid test before leaving home, before they came to the event. And we couched it very much in the language of like, for everyone's safety, for your own safety, for your family's safety. And I think it came off really well. And we received a lot of positive feedback from people. We definitely got cancellations in response to that email the morning of the event, just being like, even people being like, I don't feel well, I'm not testing positive, but listen, I don't want to chance it. I don't want to get anyone sick, so I'm just going to stay home. And by the way, now you know that, so, I'm just not a no-show. So I just thought that was a kind of a nice new touch point that we had done. And we got just also a lot of positive feedback from people who did attend and were like, I really liked that you all did that because it makes me feel more secure in my personal attendance at this event, that you all were, so serious about that. And just as a side note for NYU, when we do events on campus, people are required to submit proof of vaccination in advance. Currently, that's our current campus access policy. So everyone did have to either submit those vaccination cards in advance, or we were given permission to check at the door for guests as well. So just one thing that I think we're definitely going to carry through to the fall. But I think the trend being kind of maybe even slightly over communicating in these situations where people may not feel necessarily, I think more information is better than less as things continue to fluctuate. And just the other quick trend that I think I've seen, which Chrissy mentioned too, was sort of around, this emerging sort of mindful drinking conversation that's happening. I think for a lot of people out of the pandemic where, maybe they were drinking a bit too much at home, and God knows I participated in that. But we've been really highlighting, I think, I almost feel like mocktails is not the right word to use because it's more than that. It's not to imitate a cocktail. It's just a non-alcoholic beverage, right? So, and we're going way beyond just like a juice or soda or fizzy water. We're really thinking through really quality, if not like 2 options of a nice non-alcoholic beverage that people can enjoy, especially those that are practicing mindful drinking. But also the fun side note on those, which I recently learned is they also make great mixers for those who want alcohol in them. So like they really serve multiple purposes. And I think at the bar, if you're very clearly labeling sort of what's available, even if you're like pre-pouring on trays so people can sort of grab and go, it's always really good to relabel, because one thing we did see, we had a really great non-alcoholic drink available at a recent reception, but actually it wasn't labeled. So people are just kind of like, oh, that looks delicious, let me grab it. And then they didn't realize, for those that wanted alcohol, that it didn't have alcohol in it. So just something to throw out there.
Yeah, Trevor, I totally agree with that. And as we're looking towards the future, I honestly believe that we're going to see a huge movement, and we've already started, but I think we're going to see an even bigger push for beautiful fermentations. I think focusing on low proof cocktails that are really interesting with different flavors, but is not I mean, I love me a good martini up with a twist, trust me, but it's also nice to be able to go somewhere at an event and have something that has a little bit of alcohol in it, but is pretty low proof, and also gives me something to think about outside of cold vodka, right?
Yes, thank you. Anne Marie, I saw your hands raised as well.
Thank you. It's a pretty quick question, I think. Christy, when did your event, that campaign closing event, what time did it start and what time did it end? And also what your program timeline, how long was the program?
Oh gosh, Anne Marie, you're asking me really great questions that maybe have been deleted out of my brain at this point, given we're 8 weeks past. I believe things probably started around 5 o'clock, like 5 to 10-ish range. Ashley can probably even jump in because I know she has a good knowledge of that. And the program, I believe, lasted no longer than an hour. From my recollection.
I think it was like 5 to 9 or 5 to 9:30.
Yeah.
And then
It wasn't
program was
late.
roughly like 45 minutes. So, and it was a pretty robust program. They had a lot of people to feature, but it wasn't overwhelming, I think. So
Okay.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else before I jump into some other pre-submitted questions we got? Christy, this one came for you. So with food sourcing issues and pricing of food continuing to rise, what are some tips you can give us as we plan our fall menus at events?
Oh gosh, it's not a joke, you guys. Like, you see the headlines and you go to the grocery store and they're out of God knows what, but it's that times a million from, you know, a catering kitchen standpoint. So I guess the best advice I have for you is plan early. You know, I don't know what your planning cycle necessarily looks like for all your events, but I know you guys are getting geared up for fall stuff. Plan now if you can, when you have the time and when we know what the landscape looks like. That said, as you're planning, you know, plan for plan A. We already know, but you should plan for plan B too. And that's very true when it comes to food. So if we're thinking we're going to serve tenderloin at an event, it may be worth chatting with your catering professional and just saying, hey, if your broadliner can't get us tenderloin that day, if Stockyards is out, like, what is the next best thing that we can do? So plan A may be tenderloin, and maybe plan B is a short rib that they feel confident that they can get. And the reality is we might get to plan C, where your caterer calls you and they're like, hey, I'm so sorry, Minnesota is out of tenderloins. They do not have enough short ribs for your group, but we have a beautiful flank steak, and here's how we think we should present it. What do you think about that? Knowing, like, go into it knowing that you may have to make some last minute changes, and it's probably not because your caterer or the restaurant wasn't prepared. It's just because we physically cannot get it. And trust me, like, it's not for funsies. We're not doing it on purpose. Nobody's being lazy or not calling these people. We just truly have exhausted every one of our resources to try to make it work for you. So if you can plan ahead and then plan for flexibility, that is my best advice to you when it comes to what will be a fall filled with continued supply chain issues.
All right, Nick, this one's for you. So details matter at events. What types of unique branding ideas have you seen at events? And what event elements have really wowed guests at any of your current events that you've seen?
A good question. I think going kind of in the digital realm again, we see a lot of stuff with digital projections. It's something that's probably less expensive than printed signage. Nothing that's 100% new, but Wall clings, window clings, vinyl wraps, just provides a lots of options for branding. It's easy to install, it's easy to remove. You can apply it to a variety of surfaces, and kind of gives you a new way to transform the space and communicate messaging. And then I would just say, like, in general, brand things that you don't expect. I thought Christy had a really good point of, like, the liner of that tray can have a logo on it. Obviously, food, desserts, anything that you have, take away that has a logo on it. And I also kind of think, kind of going back to your earlier question about positive things that have come out of the pandemic, is the focus on local. So local items and businesses, what ways can you feature their products? Because we all know that all of our small businesses and local businesses need help coming from out of the pandemic. And so I think that's kind of a branding trend in its own, of anything that's local, that you can send home with guests, that kind of maybe give people the opportunity to visit their store, visit their shop, and frequent their business in a future way.
Christy, favorite event menu that you planned and why?
Obviously yours, Ashley. That was a lot of fun. I had a really good time putting that together, and like, kudos to your team for being patient with my creative bursts. I guess outside of that, a couple years ago, one of the exclusive venues that we operate went through a big refresh. It's called the Metropolitan Ballroom and Club Room. It was the hot spot to go in Minneapolis in the 80s and 90s. Fun fact, Prince played on stage there twice. And we turned it into an event venue probably late 90s, and until 2019, it was the late 90s in there. It was a total time warp. So it's time for a refresh. Went in, lots of cosmetic work that went into it. That was very much like Ginger Rogers, Fred Astaire inspired. And part of my role is creating these experiential marketing events that the company puts on. And so to create a menu based on the designer's truly quote of, he was inspired to design it based on every great dance scene between Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire, that was a really cool challenge for me. One example is a station that we put together, and it had to go on top of these mirrored vanity tables because the tables couldn't move. And ask me why we put in mirrored tables that couldn't move into a venue. That's a different coffee and conversation. But long story short, they couldn't go anywhere. And so if I'm thinking vintage, if I'm thinking these are beautiful vanity cosmetic tables, how does that translate into food and beverage? And so what Chef and I came up with is we ordered a bunch of those vintage mirrored trays that your grandma set her perfume on whenever you would go visit her, right? And so because those trays are so indicative and go hand in hand with those antique looking perfume bottles, we created individual little cups of a Thai crab salad that sat on the mirrored trays. And then as the guests would approach, they would see this kind of vanity experience. They would grab their little cup of Thai crab salad. And we had a server standing there who had a vintage perfume bottle that had either a mint spritz or a lime spritz in it. And they would just pump the little ball and spritz, just a final finishing spray onto that salad. So that event and all the different stations that went into it, I would say that's probably recently one of my most favorite things that I've had the pleasure of helping with.
Awesome, I love that. I'm like, how can I use that? Trevor, I saw your hand go up again.
Yeah, I have a question for Nick, going back to some of what you were saying about digital. And I think as event planners, we're always looking for ways to sort of streamline what we do, whether that's an app or a new process. I think we do have customer service expectations that, the experience of an Amazon or a Ticketmaster, those kinds of checkout experiences should carry through to types of things we do, whether that's registration, if it's a free event, a paid event. However, so I'm curious how you or your team sort of evaluates sort of technology to implement, and sort of what, I think this group is always about like vendors. Which vendors do you use? Like, is that a vendor that I could look at and maybe try to evaluate? But yeah, so maybe a little curious to speak about how you all do it in your organization, because sometimes it can be a pretty major investment to make sure that this system talks to this system, and that way the customer experience is seamless. I actually think like check-in for QR codes can be really good these days, right? Because it's essentially touchless for people, right? So you just have someone there, scan a QR code, great, someone's in. That's probably something a little less commonly done in the sort of special events world, maybe more in like the ticketing concert world. So yeah, just curious if you would maybe speak a little bit to that about it, more like related to events, not so much about your overall venue and sort of concerts.
Yeah, that's a good question, because definitely I think to your first point of like, how do you explore this and how do you know that your guests are going to actually use it? And I think that was step number one for us. Classical orchestra music world, the age seems to skew older. So how do we get people to actually get there? So I mean, I guess you're right, find trusted vendors. And I would just say the like as much testing and piloting of the technology you can do, the best. And I would, technology is ever changing also. So just staying on top of the latest trends and tools out there. We use a system called Tessitura, which is a worldwide like platform for ticketing that many performing arts venues use. And so that's where a lot of the data and analytics comes. And they're constantly changing the software and adding modules and integrating. I mean, there was a time where we didn't have the Apple Wallet thing, or we didn't even have Apple Pay, Google Pay at the actual box office, so there's things that have just had to obviously integrate and expand based on the technology lead. Am I getting to your question, or am I giving you a good answer, I guess was my question.
Yeah.
I think the most is, just exploring and, kind of staying on top of that and just interfacing like we're doing today, like interfacing with other people to see what they're using and what they're doing. Because there, are so many out there, and it doesn't necessarily apply to your event or your format of the event.
And Marie.
Thank you. So Nick and Christy and anybody else on the call that might be able to help. So we're ending our campaign with our final gala, and we're needing like a wow factor, like something coming out of the ceiling or something coming out of a cannon, which we joked maybe our vice president, because he's the one that wants the wow factor. But anyway, have you all seen anything really specific that has been just different as far as that ending celebration that I always think of as like confetti, but you know what I'm saying?
This may not be for your event, but Christy and I were talking about this before, and we said puppies. Anytime there are pets involved, but that might not apply to your event. But you make a good point, because a lot of what we talked about before this discussion was how are you differentiating your event and how are you creating that wow factor. I don't think I'm the best person to help answer that. I don't know if anyone else has ideas.
Is Lance on at all? I don't know if he's on or not. I see he's on, but I don't know if he's.
Oh yeah, I'm here.
Oh, I was like, you always have the wow factor. Anything?
We flew someone in the air when we did our campaign finale. I gotta see if I can find the video. We brought in a flying company, we made a custom dress out of gold. And then she flew up in the air. It was fun. Let me see if I can find the video. I'll play it for you here in a minute.
Not necessarily an ending wow factor, but from a food and beverage perspective, again, just stressing, keeping things really fun and interesting and almost novel to a point. I think people are starved for entertainment at this point that is not Netflix based. And to show them something like that perfume station where they're like, oh my God, why are you spraying my food with perfume? Something like that and small touches throughout the event can really help create big impact at these little moments that you're planning for each turn that your guest takes.
So I can chime in. My name is Karen Wagner, and I work for the A. James Clark School of Engineering at the University of Maryland. And we just this past spring did a campaign closing celebration and dinner. And there was another like building dedication that was tied into that. So there were several different events over the course of 2 days. And to bring some of the wow factor, I know we had on campus, we are lucky we have like a gymnastics group that did some like acrobatics. And I think there was somebody that was on like a silk that was doing stuff on a platform. And we've had So one thing that was talked about that I don't think ended up working out was within the engineering school, I think there were some faculty members or grad students that were trying to do like a light show that would have been in the evening after the event. Unfortunately, I don't think it panned out just logistically with the technology. They weren't ready to present it. But that's something else to consider if maybe there's somebody on campus or maybe a company that you could bring in.
I think it depends on your institution, but for me, always like I just love the arts. So any kind of student performance, whether it's highlighting an orchestra, dancers, artists, singers, you know, I have always leaned on. We're lucky. We are at NYU. We have 21 colleges and schools across the university, and a number of those are performance oriented. So we have a really great source of that, and we have the faculty that actually organize it for us, right? Because as much as I love the arts, I'm not a director, I'm not a producer. So we have those people who are able to, be creatives. I think we're all creative, but not maybe necessarily in that sense. Like the type of person who can really produce a show and pull together and be like, this is my goal, this is the purpose. Now you design, you come to me with some suggestions on how you think we could implement that through song, dance, visuals. And I think, yeah, highlighting the student talent and really just showing people like, oh my God, our students are this talented, right? Like I just watched a Broadway caliber performance, here at this function that, was just wonderful. And then finding ways to sort of weave in some interesting reveal moments, like, maybe people are entering and running through the tables, right? To make that a little more interactive. So it's not necessarily just like a stage show that you're just watching something, that's in one particular place. We've gotten sort of the best feedback from that. And also, like, of course, if you can ever, if you have some kind of a performance celebrity that maybe is affiliated with your institution. Once we had Billy Joel because he was a parent at NYU. So we just happened to be lucky that during a campaign, that person, he did a song for us. And instead of, a New York state of mind, he did a New York University state of mind. Now, I would say, of course, the chances of getting an opportunity like that, again, are slim to none. But I just think working with your development partners to see, hey, do we have any donors, prospects, someone that we could engage that, also would be a meaningful experience for them to participate in this celebration in some way. So that's one interesting thing that I think I've had the luck to be able to do at NYU, given sort of what's available to us, but understanding too that not every institution necessarily has, performing arts schools or programs that are sort of attached there. So, but highlighting then student talents in other ways, maybe even if like your school is based on science, like having them do some like really cool science experiments on stage where like colored foam flies out and, you see these kinds of things on YouTube. But I think those could be opportunities to produce something that maybe is, I think for these things, the more mission oriented and they can be, like, you don't necessarily want to hire an outside company to come in and do a show that, they could maybe go anywhere to see. You want it to be, I think, very tailored to sort of the purpose of the event and your institution.
Thanks, Trevor.
Thank you.
I think Lance is going to share, and then Anne Marie, I'll turn it over to you to kind of close us out.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
You guys see this?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is an old presentation from earlier in the week.
We have lots to celebrate tonight, but front and center, we want to shine the spotlight on the President's Council, all of you, for playing the starring role in achieving the largest fundraising initiative in the university's history.
Given the opportunities in front of us, the environment in which we are now operating, and the way it fits us hand in glove, and given the progress I think we've all shown we can make together these last few years, we don't want to be just in the Final Four. We want to deliver the best value. We want to be the most admired. We want to be understood to be the finest public university anywhere. That's where we're going, and it won't take us 150 years to get there. Thanks to you, and hail Purdue.
We had a lot of fun with that one.
Thank you. That's great. I did see the woman with the gold dress.
Hey, while I have everyone, I wanted to share that the Academic Event Professionals Conference is coming back. Last time we met was in Las Vegas. we just started the planning committee. We're going to be in Boston in October. So look, I'm going to be sending out more information for a call for speakers, but I just wanted to let everybody know to get that on your radar if you're interested. I'm pulling up the dates here. It's October 16th, 17th, and 18th. So be on the lookout for more if you guys are looking for professional development opportunities. This is a group of folks from all kinds of universities, all sizes that come together, and it's specifically just around events, and it's much different than anything you might see in case. So just want to make a plug for that as we close up here.
Thank you. Well, a great big, huge thank you to Nick and Christy. There was great information and great questions, and thank you for answering them and taking the time today. I just want to thank everyone that was here today as well for attending the coffee and conversation. And I also would just like to give a quick plug about our survey. If you haven't taken it, I did research, and the average time it takes is 45 seconds, according to my analytics from what I've received from those who have responded. And it's important to us to hear your voice because we want to keep this going, and we want it to be really important to you, and that you get information that's going to help you in your positions at each of the universities. I also wanted to just highlight about sharing your contact information. So far, those who have have taken the time for the survey, they have all agreed to share their contact information. But if you do not want that, then please let us know. I know it's been helpful for me in the past when I've had a question and I can reach out, and like Lance, I may reach out to you specifically and say, can you just send that link to me for the video? So it's really nice to have the contact information. And then to end it all, we just want to remind you that if you have any questions or any ideas for a topic, or if you would like to, present or anything like that, just reach out to one of the committee members, and we will take it from there and get your ideas in front of everyone else. So thank you so much for everyone attending, and thanks for the great questions. And again, thank you, Nick and Christy, for your expertise today. So take care. Oh, wait, Karen, you have a question. Oh, okay, never mind.